The ledger of broken promises. Look, I never thought it'd be the guy writing this. The guy whose whole family got turned upside down by an 82-year-old man with a battered notebook and a spine of pure, cold steel. My grandfather, Jakob. Yeah, that Jakob. The one my dad, Uncle Robert, and Aunt Evelyn treated like a mildly inconvenient piece of antique furniture that occasionally needed dusting, until he dusted us off permanently. It started, like most disasters do, with a phone call. Not to me, mind you. God forbid anyone actually call Jakob. No, this was the family group chat, the digital cesspool, where my father Robert Jr., investment banker, masters of the universe type, Aunt Evelyn real estate mogul, thinks suffering is having last year's Bentley, and their respective spouses and offspring, myself included. The underachieving graphic designer traded passive-aggressive barbs and vacation brags. Robert Jr. Anyone else get the sob story express mail from Dad today? Medical bills. Seriously, what's he done now? Bought shares in a leech farm. Evelyn, oh God, yes. Mine arrived an hour ago. Critical cardiac intervention. My foot. Probably just indigestion from that dreadful canned soup he insists on buying. The audacity after the allowance we set up. My phone buzzed again. A separate notification. An email. From Grandfather Jakob. Subject line, urgent family matter. My stomach did a weird little flip. I hadn't spoken to him properly in months. A birthday call, maybe. Christmas felt obligatory, rushed, guilt. That familiar, unwelcome tenant squirmed in my gut. I opened it. The email was stark. No pleasantries, just the facts, delivered with a chilling, bureaucratic precision that felt utterly unlike the Jakob I remembered, the Jakob who used to build intricate model ships and tell outrageous, slightly off-color jokes that made Grandma swat his arm. Michael, greater than recent medical evaluations have revealed a critical cardiac condition requiring immediate, specialized intervention covered by my current insurance. The procedure is essential. The shortfall is $18,750. I require this sum by the 15th of this month. I understand this is unexpected and significant. Details of the procedure and billing can be provided upon request. Greater than regards. Greater than Jakob, $18,750. Not a round number. Specific. Painful. My savings account whimpered just looking at the figure. The group chat was exploding. Cousin Chloe, Evelyn's daughter. Oh my God, Grandpa wants $25,000 from me for a failed property investment. Since when does he invest in anything besides prune juice? MOMS furious. Robert Jr. He hit me for $30K. Same spiel. Critical cardiac. Absolute nonsense. Probably funding some scam artist on late night TV. Remember the magnetic bracelet phase? Aunt Evelyn, this is extortion, plain and simple. Hayes becomes senile. Or vindictive. Probably both. We need to shut this down. Dad to me privately. Mike, ignore it. Don't encourage him. This is just another Jakob drama. I'll forget about it next week. Focus on your own life. But I couldn't. Because I remembered. Not the frail, slightly querulous old man they saw now. I remembered the Jakob who taught me how to whittle a piece of cedar into a sleek little boat when I was 8, patiently guiding my clumsy fingers, who showed up, reeking of pipe tobacco and determination, to every single one of my terrible high school art shows, buying the most awkward pieces for prices that made my mom blush, who held Grandma's hand so tightly in the hospital at the end it looked like he was trying to physically anchor her soul. That Jakob didn't do drama. He did quiet, stubborn resolve. The emails and calls started trickling in from other relatives. My cousin Dave, a decent guy, but perpetually broke, got hit for $5,000 for urgent dental reconstruction. Aunt Mildred, Dad and Evelyn's sister, estranged 4 years over some forgotten slight, got a demand for $12,000 for experimental arthritis treatment. The amounts varied, seemingly calibrated to what Jakob perceived each could afford, or perhaps what he thought they should be willing to part with. The family rhetoric hardened. Words like manipulation, senility, and financial abuse got thrown around the group chat like confetti. Strategies were devised. Ignore the letters. Send a stern email collectively stating we wouldn't be blackmailed. Threaten to involve lawyers to have him declared incompetent. Aunt Evelyn actually hired a private investigator to verify the non-existent medical procedure. He lives in that crumbling old house, she declared triumphantly on a rare, tense Zoom call convened to address the Jakob situation. Drives a 20-year-old Volvo. His clothes are threadbare. If he had real medical bills, he'd be destitute. This is clearly a fabrication to guilt trip us. Dad nodded sagely. Exactly. Hayes always been frugal to a fault. This sudden need for tens of thousands. Preposterous. Hayes testing us, trying to make us feel bad for living our lives. Well, I won't play his game. I stayed quiet. Their certainty felt brittle. Their descriptions of Jakob's life, they hadn't actually been to his house in years. Not properly. They sent generic gifts at Christmas. Maybe a cursory visit time to avoid a meal. It visited him frequently. But the last time, maybe 6 months ago, dropping off some groceries he hadn't asked for, it noticed things. The old Volvo was ancient, but spotless and purring smoothly. The crumbling house. The porch needed paint, sure, but the roof looked new, the windows tight. Inside, it wasn't opulent, but it was clean, warm, filled with his books and models and surprisingly good art, much of it mine. He wasn't destitute. He was self-contained. Purposefully so. The pressure was immense. From my father, Mike, don't be a sucker. Hayes playing you. From the group chat, mocking anyone who even suggested helping. Oh, planning to bail out Grandpa's imaginary heart, are we? Enjoy funding his bridge tournament addiction. But the image that kept me awake wasn't Jakob demanding money. It was Jakob alone in that quiet house. Jakob potentially facing something real and terrifying. And his own children treating it like a nuisance, a scam. What if it wasn't a scam? What if the procedure was real? And he died because his family couldn't be bothered. The guilt wasn't just a squirm anymore, it was a lead weight crushing my chest. I wasn't rich. $18,750 was a gut punch. It meant draining my emergency fund, putting a major project on hold, tightening the belt for a year. But I couldn't shake the feeling that not helping would cost me more. Something deeper than money. A piece of my own soul, maybe. Or the memory of the man who carved boats with me. So, I did it. 2 days before his deadline, heart pounding like a drum solo, I logged into my bank account. The transfer screen felt like staring into an abyss. This is insane. Dad's right. Hayes probably fine. You're throwing away years of savings. But I remembered his hand, rough and strong, guiding the knife on the cedar. The look of quiet pride when he hung one of my terrible charcoal sketches in his hallway. I hit confirm transfer. The confirmation email felt like a death sentence for my financial security. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my girlfriend Sarah, who would have rightly questioned my sanity. Certainly not the hyenas in the group chat. I just sat there, feeling numb and vaguely nauseous. The deadline passed. Silence from Jakob. The group chat crowed. Robert Jr. Well, anyone actually fall for it? Crickets, I assume. Told you head back down. Evelyn. The pie confirmed no major medical procedures scheduled anywhere near him. Case closed. Now, who's seen the new listings in the Hamptons? My stomach churned. Had I just been spectacularly played? Had the Jakob I remembered truly vanished, replaced by this cynical manipulator my family described? The doubt was corrosive. Then, a week later, another email. From Jakob. Same stark tone. Michael. Greater than thank you for your recent contribution. It has been noted. I request your presence, and that of the entire family, at my home this Saturday at 2 p.m. Attendance is mandatory. Matters of significant consequence will be addressed. Greater than Jakob noted. What did that mean? Noted for what? And mandatory. The sheer and Jakob-like authority in that word sent a chill down my spine. The group chat, predictably, erupted in outrage and dismissal. Evelyn, mandatory. Hayes lost his marbles entirely. I have a charity gala. Robert Jr., not a chance. This is clearly the next act in his little melodrama. Ignore it. Chloe. Ew. That dusty old house gives me hives. Curiosity wired with dread. And that tiny, persistent flicker of loyalty. I had to go. I needed to see his face. I needed to know. Saturday arrived, grey and drizzly. I pulled up to Jakob's house. The Volvo was in the driveway, gleaming faintly under the overcast sky. To my utter shock, my father's sleek Mercedes and Aunt Evelyn's monstrous SUV were already there, parked haphazardly, as if hoping for a quick escape. They'd come, reluctantly, undoubtedly, probably out of morbid curiosity or a sense of needing to control the narrative, but they'd come. Cousin Chloe's sporty little convertible was wedged in behind them. Dave's beat-up sedan rounded the corner just as I got out. Even Aunt Mildred's sensible Honda was pulling in. Head summoned, and against all odds, the scattered, indifferent flock had gathered. The air crackled with tension and resentment. We filed into the familiar living room, the smell of old books, lemon polish, and pipe tobacco, even though had quit years ago, infinitely transporting me back. Jakob sat in his worn leather armchair, the throne at the center of his modest kingdom. He wasn't diminished. That was my first shock. He looked sharper, clear-eyed, dressed in clean, pressed trousers and a crisp button-down shirt, not the cardigans we usually saw him in. He held a simple, cloth-bound notebook on his lap. His gaze swept over us as we arranged ourselves, awkwardly, the children and grandchildren perched on the edge of the sofa or leaning against bookshelves, radiating impatience and hostility. No one offered pleasantries. The silence was thick, suffocating. Robert Jr. broke it, his voice dripping with condescension. "All right, Dad. We're here. Against our better judgment. What's this mandatory summons about? Here to apologize for the wild goose chase." Jakob didn't flinch. He looked at my father, then slowly scanned the room, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second longer on me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a profound, bone-deep weariness, and beneath it, something steely. He placed a gnarled hand flat on the notebook. "This isn't an apology, Robert," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying effortlessly in the still room. It wasn't the slightly quavery voice we expected. It was firm, resonant, the voice of the Jakob who commanded ships, not the one asking for a help. "This is a reckoning." He opened the notebook. The spine cracked softly. We all leaned forward, unconsciously. "For the past 3 months," Jakob began, his tone conversational, almost detached, "I have presented each of you with a fabricated financial crisis. Medical bills, failed investments, urgent repairs." He tapped the open page. The details, the amounts requested, the supposed consequences of non-payment, all meticulously crafted. All lies. A collective gasp, not of surprise, but of vindication. Evelyn practically vibrated with righteous fury. "Ha, I knew it. Senile old fool. Playing games." She spat, "Wasting our time, causing unnecessary stress. How dare you?" Robert Jr. sneered. "Pathetic, Dad. Truly pathetic. What was the point? To prove we don't jump when you snap your fingers anymore. To make yourself feel relevant." Jakob remained unnervingly calm. He ignored their outbursts, his eyes still fixed on the ledger. "The point, Evelyn, Robert, was never the money." He paused, letting the words hang. "The point was always the response." He looked up, finally meeting their furious gazes. "The point was to see which of you, when presented with the idea of my vulnerability, my potential ruin, my need, would lift a finger. Which of you remembered that I am not merely an obligation, a line item in your estate planning, but your father, your grandfather." He flipped a page in the notebook. My heart hammered against my ribs. I saw columns, names, dates, amounts, notes. "I have, as you know, been fortunate in my investments over the years," Jakob continued, his voice dropping slightly. "Frugal, yes, as Evelyn so kindly observed, but frugality combined with compound interest over 6 decades builds something more substantial than prune juice reserves." A ghost of his old, dry smile touched his lips, gone in an instant. Your mother and I, we provided. We saved. We planned. Not for yachts and Bentleys, but for security, for dignity, for the legacy we hoped to leave to a family that valued more than just the bottom line. He sighed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. Your mother's passing, it changed things. For me. For you. The calls dwindled. The visits became perfunctory, burdensome. Birthdays acknowledged with a check, not your presence. Christmas a rushed hour, eyes glued to phones, conversations about stocks and properties, never about lives. My life. I became background noise, an old appliance you kept plugged in out of habit, not affection. His words landed like stones. Robert Jr. shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn looked away, her jaw clenched. Chloe examined her manicure. Dave stared at the floor. Mildred watched Jakob with a strange intensity. So, Jakob said, his voice regaining its steely edge, I devised a test. A final assessment, not of your wealth, but of your character, of your humanity. He tapped the ledger again. This book records every request made, every response, every excuse, every slammed door, virtual or real. He looked directly at Robert Jr. Robert requested $30,000 for critical cardiac surgery. Response: email stating financial blackmail unacceptable, suggestion of senility, threat of legal action for undue influence. Follow-up calls ignored. He read it dispassionately, like a courtroom clerk. Robert flushed crimson. You lied to me. You manipulated the situation. Did I? Jakob asked softly. Or did I merely present a scenario that revealed your true priorities? A scenario where your father's life, in your estimation, wasn't worth $30,000, a sum you spend on a single watch. He turned to Evelyn. Evelyn requested $25,000 for a catastrophic property investment loss. Response: multiple angry phone calls accusing me of fabrication and manipulation. Hiring of a private investigator to expose me. Group chat messages ridiculing the request. Funds refused. Evelyn sputtered. You were fabricating. You admit it. And your response, Jakob countered, his voice like ice, was to investigate your father like a criminal suspect rather than offer a moment's genuine concern or assistance. You sought proof of my deceit, not proof of my need. Your priority was protecting your wallet, not your parent. He went down the list. Chloe, $15,000 for urgent educational debt relief for fiction used with mocking texts. Suggestion he sells some junk. Dave, $5,000 for dental reconstruction agonized. Explained his financial situation. Begged for time. Offered $500 immediately, which Jakob refused, wanting the full test. Mildred, $12,000 for experimental treatment sent along. Hesitant email expressing doubt about the treatment's legitimacy, but offering to help research alternatives or contribute what she could, $1,000 immediately. Jakob had refused the partial payments too, needing the clear, binary choice. He finally looked at me. The room felt airless. Michael requested $18,750 for critical cardiac intervention. Response: full amount transferred via bank transfer on the 13th. No questions asked. No complaints aired in the group forum. No investigation launched. My face burned. Every eye in the room swiveled towards me. My father's stare was pure, disbelieving fury. Evelyn's was scathing contempt. Chloe looked like she'd smelled something rotten. You gave it to him. Robert Jr. hissed at me, barely containing his rage. After we all agreed it was a scam. You idiot. Jakob held up a hand. It silenced the burgeoning storm. Michael acted, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly when he said my name. Out of something you all seem to have misplaced: compassion, loyalty, the simple, human impulse to help family in perceived distress. He didn't know it was a test. He believed the lie. And he gave what he could, at significant cost to himself, because he believed his grandfather needed him. He closed the ledger with a soft, final thump. The sound echoed in the silent room. The results, Jakob stated, his voice regaining its full, uncompromising strength, are clear. Painfully, unequivocally clear. This ledger is not just a record of requests and refusals. It is a record of broken promises, of forgotten duty, of love eroded by greed and self-absorption. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze sweeping over his children and most of his grandchildren, the lighthouse beam cutting through fog. You see, the inheritance you all seem to have been counting on waiting for. He paused, letting the implication hang heavy. That inheritance was never guaranteed. It was contingent. Contingent on you being more than just names on a family tree. Contingent on you being a family. He stood up. He wasn't tall, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over us, radiating an authority that silenced even Robert's brewing outrage. "My will," Jakob announced, the words dropping like stones into a still pond, "has been revised. Radically. Based entirely on the entries in this ledger." Panic flared in Evelyn's eyes. "Dad, you can't be serious. This is monstrous. Punishing us for not falling for your twisted little game." "It's not a punishment, Evelyn," Jakob said, his voice chillingly calm. "It's a consequence. It's an alignment of my legacy with the values, or lack thereof, you have demonstrated. The bulk of my estate, the investments, the property, the proceeds from the sale of this house," he gestured around the room. "The home filled with memories none of them seem to value. Will be divided between several charities dedicated to elder care and medical research. Organizations that actually help people in genuine need." A collective gasp, sharp and horrified, ripped through the room. Robert Jr. looked apoplectic. "Charities? You'd give it to strangers." "Strangers," Jakob said quietly, "who have shown me more basic human decency in their mission statements than my own children have shown me in the last decade." He turned his gaze back to the ledger, then to me. "Michael, your willingness to help, believing the need was real, demonstrated the loyalty and compassion that should define family. You will receive a specific, significant bequest, enough to secure your future, reward your character, and hopefully remind you that blood should mean something more than genetics." He looked at Mildred. "Mildred, you expressed doubt, but also offered help and a willingness to contribute what you could. You questioned the means, not my worth. You will receive a smaller, but meaningful sum in recognition of that fundamental decency." He snapped the ledger shut decisively. "For the rest of you, Robert, Evelyn, Chloe," his gaze swept over them, devoid of malice, but utterly devoid of warmth. "You have made your choices abundantly clear. Your priorities are documented. You have disinherited yourselves through your actions long before I put pen to paper on this new will. You will receive the legal minimum required to prevent contestation, $1 each, a symbolic acknowledgement of the biological connection that clearly holds no other value for you." The silence that followed wasn't just silence, it was a vacuum. The sound of worlds collapsing. Evelyn made a small, choke sound, her face ashen. Robert Jr. surged to his feet, trembling with incoherent rage. "You vindictive old bastard. You can't do this. I'll fight this. I'll have that will overturned. You're clearly not competent." Jakob met his son's fury with terrifying calm. "Competence, Robert, is not determined by how readily one parts with money on demand. Competence is demonstrated by sound judgment, by adherence to principle. My mind is sound. My lawyer is thorough. My documentation," he tapped the ledger again, "is irrefutable. Fight if you wish. Drain your resources contesting it. It will only prove my point further. The ledger stands." He walked slowly towards the door leading to the hall, effectively dismissing us. He paused, turning back one last time. His eyes weren't triumphant. They were profoundly sad. "I loved you all, once. Fiercely. Your mother did too. We built what we had for you. But somewhere along the way you forgot how to love back. You forgot what family costs. Not in dollars, but in time, in attention, in simple kindness." He looked at the ledger in his hand. "This is the price of that forgetting. Don't bother contacting me again. My affairs are in order. My conscience is clear. Goodbye." He walked out of the room, leaving us standing there amidst the comfortable furniture and the shelves of books, ship models gazing silently down on the wreckage. The air buzzed with shock, fury, disbelief, and a terrible, dawning comprehension. Robert Jr. slammed his fist down on a side table, sending a small ceramic figure crashing to the floor. Evelyn burst into noisy, angry tears. Chloe looked stunned, her phone forgotten in her hand. Dave just shook his head slowly, a grim understanding on his face. Mildred closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I stood there, numb, the weight of Jakob's words and the searing stares of my family pressing in on me. The money, it didn't feel real. The vindication was overshadowed by the sheer, brutal devastation Jakob had wrought. He hadn't just disinherited them financially. He disinherited them emotionally, morally, finally, and irrevocably severing the frayed threads of obligation. Head held up a mirror, and the reflection had been so ugly they couldn't bear to look, but Head forced them to see it, and Head recorded it all, that damned cloth-bound ledger. As the first shouts erupted, Robert roaring about lawyers, Evelyn shrieking about injustice, Chloe whimpering about her trust fund, I slipped out. I couldn't breathe in that toxic atmosphere of rage and betrayal. I stood on the porch, the cool drizzle of relief on my burning face. I looked back through the window. They were a tableau of entitled grief, circling the ruins of their expectations. My phone buzzed. A new email. From Jakob. Michael. Greater than don't linger with the vultures. Come around back to the workshop when you're ready. There's something I'd like to show you. And some tea, if you'd like. We have much to discuss. Properly. Greater than Jakob. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The old Volvo sat there, a silent testament to the man who valued substance over show. The rain whispered on the leaves. Inside the house, the storm of my family's making raged on, a fury born of their own choices, meticulously recorded in a simple notebook. The reverse inheritance was complete. Jakob hadn't taken their money. He'd taken their illusions, and had given me, in the midst of the wreckage, a terrifying, heavy, and utterly unexpected gift, the truth, and the legacy of a man who finally decided enough was enough. The ledger was closed, and for some of us, the real accounting was just beginning. I walked around back, towards the workshop, towards the man who carved boats, towards a future I hadn't dared imagine, leaving the sound of shattered expectations fading behind me in the damp afternoon air. The quiet click of the workshop door closing behind me felt like the sound of a vault ceiling shut, separating one world from another, one kind of family from what might yet remain. Jakob stood by the old workbench, not carving, just waiting, the infamous ledger set aside. To steaming mugs sat waiting. He didn't smile, but the terrible sadness in his eyes had eased, replaced by a weary kind of peace. He gestured to a stool. Sit, Michael. Let's talk. About the future. About what real legacy means. The silence in the workshop, filled only by the ticking of an old clock and the distant, muffled sounds of chaos from the main house, was the most profound thing I'd ever heard. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was the weight of his judgment, the burden of his disappointment in others, and the fragile, terrifying hope of living up to the faith He'd placed, finally and solely, in me. The reverse was complete. The reckoning was done. Now, we had to build something new from the pieces left behind. He picked up a small block of wood, running his thumb over the grain. Always start with a clear vision, Michael, he said, his voice rough but steady. And a sharp knife. The rest is just careful cuts. He handed me the wood. It felt solid, real, like a promise. Or maybe, just maybe, a new beginning carved from the heartwood of an old man's broken dreams.